All right, guys, we got a nerd fight. Nerd fight alert. Nerd fight alert. So, headline is Tucker Carlson and Charlie Kirk slam atheist Sam Harris as a, quote, terrified little child. Oh, this ought to be good. So I don't know if this is Tucker's podcast or if this is Charlie Kirk's podcast, but let me play the video for you and we'll react as we go.
Yes. But the idea that there are people who are completely certain as a matter of religious faith that there's no God, I just find it hilarious and like so childish. I just can't take it seriously. And so I was talking to someone the other day who's like, well, Sam Harris is smart. It's like, do we have evidence Sam Harris is smart? Sam Harris seems like a child to me.
He has no wisdom.
Like a terrified little child.
I've never heard
Sam Harris seems like one of the dumbest people I've ever listened to in my life. Like, if you live in a world of people like, oh, well, Sam Harris is very smart. Really? I'm not going to agree to that because it's demonstrably untrue.
He's never said.
Tucker's laugh is so creepy. It's always like way over the top. All right, so Sam Harris. Let's talk a little bit about Sam Harris. I am not the biggest Sam Harris fan. He operates in this weird place where he's like sort of a standard establishment Democrat apologist, has kind of centrist, liberal type takes. But the issues he's obsessed with, I find kind of vacuous. So one of the things he's obsessed with that he always comes back to is the whole wokeness thing. Which is like, okay, fair enough. If we get into the specifics, I might agree with you on some of your criticisms. But the over-focusing on cancel culture and wokeness, I just find so stale and so silly. So that's one of his big things. And then the other big thing is like anti-Trump in the silliest way possible, which is more about like his antics, his personal characteristics, his crassness, his qualities, which is like, yeah, there's a lot of material there, but everything's obvious. Right, like how loathsome of a person he is. I care more about the policies and the specifics. And honestly, I don't think he knows all that much about like the specifics of what Trump actually did as president. So, and then of course he got into big trouble recently when he basically said like, I wouldn't care if Hunter Biden had kids tied up in his basement dead or some shit. And everybody was like, what the fuck? Like, what kind of a weird thing to say is that? And the right flipped out over it. But honestly, I think fair, right? Like, no, that's a crazy fucking thing to say. And he tried to clarify and say, Sam does do this all the time, where he's like, if you disagree with him, he does this thing where it's like, oh, you must just misunderstand me. It's like, no, Sam, sometimes people just fucking disagree with you. And sometimes you didn't word things exactly right. And so that's going to fuel the disagreement even more. That really annoys me. Because I think any reasonable person at a certain point could say, agree to disagree. Yeah, you disagree with me. Fine, right? He's never like, yeah, fair enough. You've misunderstood me and mischaracterized me. And it's like, okay, come on, man, it's getting tired. You know, not everybody at the core of it fundamentally agrees with you and just misunderstood, right? So I'm not a big fan of Sam Harris. But having said that, I mean, the idea that they act like he's a fucking idiot, he's one of the dumbest people he's ever heard of or something like that. They said something to that effect. That's goofy. Come on, you know that's not true. You know that's not true. You might not think he's brilliant, right? You might think he's a little overconfident, sure. But to say, like, oh, he's just a total idiot. No. Come on. And then the other point, the early point where he was like, you know, he believes as a matter of religious faith that there's no God. What a silly, childish position. I find that take from Tucker and Charlie Kirk so pompous, right? Because it is strawmanning the kind of typical atheist position. The typical atheist position is like, look, I don't see much evidence of a God, so my default perspective is there's no God unless you somehow prove to me with evidence otherwise. And I think that's a fair position. But even Richard Dawkins says, and he's in the same sort of new atheist category as Sam Harris, he says, I'm making these numbers up here, but like on a scale of 1 to 5, 1 being utter certainty there is a God, 5 being utter certainty there isn't a God, Dawkins has him like a 4 or like a 4.5 or something like that. So even he, and I'm sure Sam Harris would put himself in this category as well, is like, yeah, I don't know for sure, but, you know, I just don't see much evidence of it. And again, I think that's a fair, reasonable position. But it seems to me like, you know, Tucker and Charlie Kirk, they've of course thrown their lot in with like the Christian group. And so it's just sort of smugly shitting on anybody who's not in their little clique, right? Like that's the sense I get from it.
Anything wise. He might.
Sam Harris is like a ridiculous figure. Ooh, Sam Harris is very smart. Oh, really? Okay. How are we measuring that?
Through how many degrees you have. So,
I just love that. And
is Tucker drunk? Is he drunk? He's usually not this like laughy and unhinged, right?
No, that was like a smart person who said it to me. Okay.
He tries to say that you can come up with an objective moral construct via atheism and fails miserably. But the intelligentsia that's running our planet right now, they are practicing parishioners in the Church of Sam Harris.
Yeah,
What? No, they really are not. They really are not. Yeah, 70% of this country is Christian. Most of our elected leaders are Christian. I mean, there are different varieties of Christians. Some are like evangelical fundamentalists. Others are like, loosely affiliated Christians who are probably more deist. But yeah, what a ridiculous overstatement in terms of like his influence. And he's even too dismissive of Sam Harris's attempt to do some sort of non-religious morality approach. Insofar as I understand his perspective on that, it's like that which brings about less pain and suffering and more feelings of like joy and happiness. Like those things are good. Like to say that we can't differentiate objectively between good and bad is to pretend like we don't know the difference in preference from being in excruciating pain and being in extreme happiness, right? And like everybody knows one of those things is good to the extent that the word good means anything, and one of those things is bad, right? And so he's building off that foundation. And I think that's fair, right? It's a secular, rational approach to try to say, how should we act? What is good? What is bad? What ought one to do? And again, I just think they're too dismissive of that. And also the idea that like these two guys are religious. The idea that they have anything to say about any sort of like objective moral code is like, you guys get yours from a fucking cult to the extent that you follow it, right? Just a large cult. You're following some, 1,000-year-old religion that has a holy book that has incredibly goofy things in it. And contradictions left and right, and a list of 10 commandments where a majority of even those commandments are not the things you'd put on a list of the 10 things that you should definitely remember. So it's just, if you're part of some religious group, any sort of like smugly shitting on an atheist or an agnostic who sort of created their own life philosophy based on their own reason, it's like, almost by default, I'm going to respect more the atheist or agnostic who has a more reasonable moral code using their own mind and using their own ethics and feelings of empathy and sympathy, etc. The stuff they do is the easy shit, right? It's just like, I'll join these guys over here. This group, this pre-existing group, I'm with them. It's like, okay, that's not intelligent. That's not intellectual. That's just, standard operating procedure for any non-thinking person. So, I guess I'm with these people, right? I was raised with these people. I guess I'm with these people. So you're not some intellectual powerhouses.
Metaphorically,
no, of course, but it's like Unitarianism. It's just like a sad, doomed little church. It's not even interesting. I mean, there are all kinds of religions that I don't believe in that I think are kind of compelling and speak to something that's true.
Yeah, but Sam agrees with that too in the context of like Buddhism and spirituality type stuff. So I think he's more dismissive of Islam, Christianity, Judaism, even though he's from a Jewish background. I think he's more dismissive of that. But I mean, I think that's fair. Like, I think one can evaluate different religions and say, I agree more with that one than that one. And he does that. And I think he's more sympathetic to Eastern philosophies like Buddhism and whatnot, because he's big into like meditation and stuff like that. So even this is sort of like a straw man of what his beliefs are. And again, guys, I'm no fan of Sam Harris at all. So for me to even bring this stuff up is hilarious. It's like I'm defending a guy who I would probably vehemently disagree with on the majority of things at this point.
Or have some good premises, right?
Yeah, exactly. Or at least like there is a kind of crackling fire about them that seems like it's coming from somewhere. Like I don't believe in it, but I look at it and I'm like, I'm not dismissing that as like absurd. I think it's wrong, but I kind of get it. I get why people are Muslims. I do. And I'm not a Muslim. But I look at Sam Harris and I'm like, you're like a fifth grader. I'm in charge.
Look, on the religion point, I get that, like, I'm not religious. It doesn't speak to me very much. I'd much rather read books on psychology and philosophy or politics or history than fucking religious stuff. That's just me. But I agree that I understand where some people get that meaning from. I'm totally tolerant and respectful of people who might be, like, quote-unquote part of a religion insofar as they just sort of view it as, yeah, it's kind of part of their identity. They were raised in it, and it's just like, these are my people. I'm sympathetic on that front, and I can get it. What I don't get is the literalists, the fundamentalists, or the people who just have really goofy beliefs that make zero sense, that are willing to defend things that are obviously untrue. So yeah, I'm more sympathetic to Sam on this point. Maybe he's a little more anti-theist than I am. Like maybe he would say if you eradicate religion totally, that'd be better for the world. I don't know if I go that far because I know there's some people who just need that sort of extra security blanket. I know people who are religious, and honestly, they're probably really religious just to get by. They get comfort from it, and I'm more sympathetic on that than maybe Sam is. But yeah, he's a hardcore anti-theist. I'm like a mild anti-theist, and Tucker sounds like he's pro-theist in a sense, even though he himself might not believe all that much. I don't know, but now he's going, oh, he's like a fifth grader type stuff. Let's listen to the rest.
But that's fine. There are like a lot of people like that. But for other people to look on at Sam Harris, who was truly an absurd figure, and be like, oh, he's really smart. God, we have just, we're not measuring this correctly, I don't think.
All right. Final conclusion. I don't think he's absurd. I'm not as dismissive of him as Tucker and Charlie Kirk. In fact, I think he's way better than Charlie Kirk or Tucker. These sort of dismissive criticisms I would reserve more for the likes of Tucker and Charlie than I would for Sam Harris. But overall, yeah, I do find it weird. There's some people who have a lot of stans and simps, right? Like Jordan Peterson is one where he's got this giant following that would like fucking, tap dance over hot coals for him. And Sam used to have that. I don't know if he has that nearly as much anymore, but like that I don't get. I don't get the standing for one thinker. And if people did it with me, I'd be uncomfortable too. Because it's like, I'm just a dude giving my thoughts. You're a dude or a girl or whatever giving your thoughts. And we're really not that much different. Like, I'm not some genius, brilliant person, and most people aren't. And it's just like, we're just talking, right? And so I don't get the worshiping Sam Harris. I do find that sort of cringe and weird and kind of sad. But I feel the same way about the worshiping of like Jordan Peterson. I mean, even with Tucker, he probably has some simps too. That's kind of weird, right? Charlie Kirk, I don't think he has that many simps. But yeah, I guess I'm not as dismissive. I'm much less dismissive of Sam than Tucker is. Like every now and then I'll listen to one of his podcasts or whatever and think, yeah, maybe I agreed with like 37% of that. I mean, he clearly thinks his things through even when I totally disagree with him. So anyway, I'm kind of babbling now, but I think you guys get the point. It's just funny for a guy as sort of ridiculous as Tucker Carlson and Charlie Kirk, for these guys to be the like super dismissive ones. It's like, you guys are definitely way less heterodox than Sam is. And again, with Sam, I don't agree with him a lot of the time. And sometimes his heterodoxness is just sort of annoying and grating, right? But at least he is kind of more thinking for himself than you guys are, right? Like he has pissed off a giant percentage of his fan base because he actively chose, I'm not going to go down the anti-vaccine rabbit hole. I'm not going to, pretend like Trump's intelligent. I'm not going to get lost in this like anti-wokeness stuff where all my other political opinions are totally out the window. So a little more principled in that respect. Whereas these guys are more like, they sort of just go with the crowd on the right. Like you're not heterodox thinkers. You really are leading figures in a pretty overall brain dead political project. So, and that's probably why he feels comfortable, why these two feel comfortable in smugly dismissing Sam the way they are, is that they know they have that sort of partisan hack political base that's going to nod along in agreement with them. Ever since Adpocalypse, when YouTube defunded all independent news and politics overnight, we haven't trusted them. We know they can pull the rug out from underneath us at any time. If you enjoy this content, please consider tipping $1 or $2 per month on the Secular Talk Patreon. Link in the video description box below. Thanks for your support.